Director of Content and Coaching at Chapman Foundation. I'm glad to see all your faces popping onto the screen. I want to introduce the other people that are with me on the call today and leading this conversation. So we have Katie Trotter, who is our Chief Program Officer at Chapman Foundation. And then we also have Lainey Gager, who is our Content, Quality, and Logistics Specialist. I have to slow down to say that because it's a lot of words. For you, all that means is that Lainey is the person that got you here, made sure you had all the information before. She will make sure you have all the information after. And if you need any help while we're on the call today, feel free to send a message in chat to Lainey if you have technical issues or just something comes up and you need to take care of something else. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our conversation topic today on courageous leadership and what that looks like in terms of leading in an ever-changing world. I think many of us know there is a ton of change that we currently are subject to in our homes, in our culture, in our organizations. And so a lot of what we want to talk to today is how do we navigate that well, not only for ourselves, but for other people around us. A couple important notes about our session today. The first is to know that this is part of a year-long series that we are doing on key topics that are important to leaders in creating caring workplaces. And so we're doing hour-long sessions where you get an opportunity to sit and learn a little bit about the topic. And then those are followed up by speaker panels where we have invited in people that have had some success in this area and want to share a little bit of their tips and tricks, and also honor some of the challenges that go along the way in the space that they'll be speaking to. So I'll tell you more about those dates when we get to the end of our session today. The other thing I want to make sure you are aware of is we are not your normal sit and get organization. So you should plan on what this looks like today in our hour is some time for you to do some self-reflection. We will put you in breakout rooms where you can have conversation, and we will debrief about some of those conversations when we all come back together. And the intent behind that is we all want to learn from each other. If it's just Katie and I talking, you will not get nearly as deep of a learning as if you share your knowledge, your expertise, your experience with each other. So that is kind of your cue that if you want to turn on your camera, that always helps to have a face to talk to. And be prepared to unmute as we go forward throughout the course of our time together. All right, so let's talk about what this should look like for you by the end of our session together. I love what Katie says. She says, we are time optimists. This is what we hope to cover in an hour. As we talk about change, we want to understand the challenges of leading change in workplaces. I think probably some of you already feel that deeply. I suspect that's why you maybe enrolled and showed up today, is that you're aware of those challenges and want some tools. When we talk about those tools, we're going to intentionally look at Kotter's 8 steps for leading change and just build in there some awareness about how we step into change and awareness of how we might help others step into change through those 8 steps. We are going to then also utilize that information to really consider how we might intentionally design and benefit from creating caring workplaces where we navigate change through that lens first of how do we care for other people in the process as they go through change and are asked to do things different than what they're used to. At the end of this session and all of our sessions, we also are going to have a take back tool for you if you like, that you can utilize to further the conversation. We know the conversation is hard to do all by yourself. So our encouragement to you is to take the PowerPoint, which will be a simplified PowerPoint, a thought organizer, and engage other people in the conversation after you leave here today. So you aren't going it alone by yourself. All right, let's talk about change management. And I like that it has the word success on here because as you start to read the numbers, what you might notice is there's not often a lot of success that goes along with change management. And in fact, 17% of business professionals would rate their organizations as highly effective at managing change, which is just a really nice way of saying 83% are not doing well in this area. And in fact, the data from McKinsey and Company supports this. And you look at the left side of the circle, 70% of organizational change initiatives tend to end in failure. They don't launch. And we're going to talk more about why that is. But what we want to do first is give you the opportunity to consider when you have experienced change. So this is that self-reflection that I just referred to for a moment, where we want you to think of a significant change you have either experienced or implemented at work. Think about what went well with that change and what was maybe a challenge. I am going to give you approximately 3 minutes to write down your thoughts on this. And then when you come back from that, we are going to put you into breakout rooms. I think Lainey is going to do triads, if I remember correctly. And we're going to give you an opportunity to discuss further what insights you have from this. All right, that's me stopping talking and giving you 3 minutes to reflect on the questions on the screen. Okay, for most of the faces I can see, it looks like you're done writing. Lainey, how are you doing on breakout rooms? Are you ready?
Yep, all set.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead. Lainey will put the questions in chat for us, but basically we want you to move into your breakout rooms and discuss that change. What went well? What was a challenge? And what insights do you have from that? We're going to give you about 9 minutes in triads, and then we'll come back to debrief. Look forward to seeing you soon. We can just have a discussion. You were talking about why does organizational change fail so frequently? You've probably seen some successes, but I'm guessing you also talked about a lot of places where it was challenged, it didn't go well. So let's hear from all of you. What came up in that? And if you want, here's what I do with this large of a group. Feel free to use the raise your hand icon, and then you don't have to worry about whether or not you interrupt somebody. So let's hear a little bit more about your discussion, some common denominators, and why change maybe fails so frequently. Ryan, I see you're off mute. Did you want to add?
No, ma'am. Sorry.
I'm so sad now.
In my group, okay, fine. You peer pressure me into talking. No, in our group, it was great. I think in the military, that's all we are is change, right? And
Yeah.
I can get a head nod from a certain somebody who's going to be traveling to some place, right? Not knowing that was going to be in their future, but we are constantly changing, and it is every day. And it just fascinates me that by and large, our leadership has no idea the effects of putting somebody in the box, especially a box that they can't even control themselves. So I would say that some of the soft skills and the OCL stuff has helped me build some of the strategic IQ of why we're putting people through all of this change, and it's helped them kind of grow through it and not just like, here, you're in the box, good luck.
Ryan, part of what I think you bring out so beautifully there is this notion of like, we can make people, but we can't make them come from a place where their heart is included in that. And so while they might oblige us, they may not be willingly following us with their heart in place. So it depends on how you measure success, doesn't it? I think it was Michelle's hand was up.
I actually wanted to tag on with the other side of what Ryan was saying. I'm a mill spouse, so we get orders from on high and are like, whoosh, go prosper, right? Like live long and prosper. And what we were talking about in our breakout room was how to get investment by the individuals in it, right? And in the military community, it's hard to show the value of the larger non-active duty community and the value in having a functioning group outside of the active duty. And there are programs aimed at doing that, but a lot of people don't see them or aren't familiar with them. And getting investment in these kind of changes, even if you have top leadership, which is super important, you also need to show the value to get lower investment upwards. And that's kind of what we were talking about.
Yeah, which is hard to do, to Ryan's point, right? If it's just been sort of shoved down.
And with and people constantly moving and priorities of the commanders constantly changing. Every 2 years, you got a new commander. They could have a totally different idea of what's going on. People come and go, somewhat cyclically, but 2 times a year, and you never know who's going to come, who's going to go until they show up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a harsh reality. Gary, I see your hand is up. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I was with Linda and Brittany, and the theme that emerged from all 3 of our stories was leadership change, and how there's been a lot of it at the top of our organizations, and how we deal with that. In Linda's case, she got to participate in selecting a new leader and ended up in a better place. But just the turnover, and to the previous point about every 2 years cycling, it's hard for the employees in a company to get behind change initiatives, when 2 years later it might change again in a different direction. And so that instability sort of undermines, I think, the implementation of long-term change.
Yeah, the instability undermines the motivation is also what I can hear you saying, and that, as well as Michelle. Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons why change fails frequently. It's not done well, it's not communicated well. We don't leave time for people's heads and hearts to show up. I'm gonna let Katie jump in and move us into our next session, or sorry, not our next session, but our next portion on what are steps that we can take to really implement change or lead change in a different way.
Thank you, Heather. And I think some of you already alluded to this in your comments. This is a fitting title. We're leading in an ever-changing world. Whether or not your organizations are experiencing a change in policies or procedures, or in the people that are there, or the leadership that's happening, oftentimes in our roles, it's coming to terms with the fact that the consistent part is that we are working with people, alongside people, that are constantly being impacted by the changes that are happening within your teams and your organizations. Now, we talk about change throughout all of our foundational courses and looking at it through a lot of different lenses. For the purpose of this training, we're going to look at it through this lens of how do we model care through the process of change. And we're going to do that by looking both at the individual level and experience and the organization. So in this first part, we're going to be starting to look at what is the change process that each individual person on your team is going through every time your organization experiences a shift. And how do we as leaders use those opportunities as a way to model care and connection? Because we can't often control the change, but we can control the impact that the change has on our culture. Then we're going to take kind of a broader step back and take a look at what's happening within the organization as a whole. We have to understand the individual in order to demonstrate care, but part of our responsibility is also understanding how do we need to change the organization or drive the change through the organization in a way that's going to stick and be effective while not compromising on the care that we show individuals. So in this portion, we're going to pull the model that we use in our Community Transforms that's based off of Kotter's 8 steps for leading change. So we'll do kind of a high-level walkthrough of what those stages for the organization are and look at it through the lens of how can we align all of those unique individuals in our team in a way that helps to support the change, regardless of where they're at in the process of accepting it. And then next step will be taking a look at where does our organization do really well in those 8 stages and where might we want to focus on some growth opportunities. We're going to cover all of that and get you out on time. In this first part, we're going to talk about the individual. We're going to talk about how each person processes change. And this is an image that we use in our Community Listens that we talk about the change process model. And I'm going to first walk you through what all the steps are, and then I'll give you a real life example of what that might look like. So before a person or an individual on your team is aware that there is a change coming from the organization, they're essentially unaware. They're going about their day-to-day work. As soon as a change gets rolled out, brought up for discussion in a team meeting, a person becomes aware, and then we get put, what we would say, in the box. And as soon as you put someone in the box by confronting them with a change that's coming, they're going to experience some form of anxiety. And this can vary dramatically based on the person, based on the level of change that's being asked. But it's not uncommon that it might show up with some anxiety or some annoyance, maybe a little bit of the heel digging in resistance to the change. If it's a bigger change, you might see some people get a little bit teary or get a little bit angry. Whatever that looks like, some form of emotion is typically the first response for an individual in the change process. And sometimes as leaders, I think we get to this point and it's easy for us to dismiss team members as being resistant to change, or they're kind of a barrier to the change. But realistically, that level of emotion is a very normal, healthy part of accepting the change process. So we as leaders have an opportunity to really make space for people to be heard when they're experiencing all of those initial reactions, even if we know we can't prevent the change from happening, because those are the opportunities where we can build a lot of connection. Now, these next three phases of acceptance, attachment, and anticipation don't have to happen in any particular order. So I'll just kind of walk us through those three. Acceptance is the moment where an individual starts to cognitively engage their thought process, right? So they begin to logically rationalize why the change is being made or why they're being asked to change. The attachment phase is kind of represented by the heart, right? This is the emotional buy-in. There starts to get a little bit of hopefulness or anticipation or excitement around what could become possible if this change happens. It might not be motivated by the change in and of itself. It might instead be motivated by the relationships of people on the team. And then this last one of the three is the anticipation. And this is when people really start to bring their unique ideas, their gifts, their talents in order to start preparing for the change that needs to be made. And then you'll see here on this nice, beautiful chart that everyone on your team will happily act on the change and everything is right with the world. And I love that I can see some of you laughing right now, because the truth is, it is not that easy. There is a variety of different things that will push people in and then back out of the box and jump back in, right? I think I'm going through the motions. I think I'm on board. We run into a barrier or a roadblock, and I am right back to anxiety, wondering, why are we doing this change in the first place, right? So people are going to move through this in a variety of different orders, at a variety of different paces. The important part is that when we as leaders can give people space to be heard and to work through all of these phases, they're much more likely to be fully bought into the change and helping the organization to make it successful. So I want to give a quick example of what might this look like, and we'll use a change that our organization is going through. So last year, we experienced a significant amount of growth in the employees that we had on our team. And one of the things that we realized is that all of these different departments were using their own project management tools, their own project management software. And as an organization, we hit a moment of realizing this is going to limit our growth. It's going to limit our ability to communicate well, to have an idea of what's happening across departments, to work together. And so a change was announced. When you roll out a change about a required software project management system, we put every single team member, including those of us who were on the team to make the decision, in the box. And there was a variety of different emotions. You're going to see some people who are kind of cautiously optimistic, some who are really resistant and defensive because they love their workflow that they're using right now, some who are a little bit nervous, right? Variety of emotions. And then logically, we can start to see how people can understand this is meeting a need. It's meeting a need for our board of directors to have accurate information. It's meeting a need for team members to work across departments. The emotional buy-in, that attachment phase, can really show up as people start to realize the successes that are possible, how they can have these moments of connection across the organization. And what I really love about the anticipation phase is it's when you as a leader get to see how everyone works so differently. You saw some people on our team decide, hey, I need to time block a certain amount of time each week to start getting on board with this. Some people wanted to hop on a call and work with someone live to troubleshoot some different ways to approach it, but they're working through a way to really fully embrace the change. Now, what some of you are probably already thinking is that as an organization, sometimes people don't hop out of the box, right? And that's when we get to bring in all of the tools. How's this for a little preview in our following sessions, where we talk about how to have feedback and confrontation in a way that still models care. But this is the process that people go through. Now, as I mentioned, on your teams, you'll find that not everyone is going to move in the same pace. And this is from the diffusion of innovation theory, where they talk about, in general, when you roll out a change in an organization, you're going to have about 16% of team members fall under this early adapter category. They're excited about it. They're self-motivated. The idea of being in this risk-taking or innovation space doesn't throw them off. They're kind of like, let's figure it out as we go. A majority of your team is going to fall in this 68% of the middle adapter, or we call them the riders. In this group, you'll see people who are maybe just kind of playing it safe. I'm open to the idea. I'm also open to the idea that this might not be the right change for us. I'm kind of waiting to see if it's going to work or not. And the more that I can see some successes happening, or the more I realize that leadership is fully bought in, I'm going to move a little bit closer to being on board. You'll see that this last group, the other 16%, are your late adapters. And we sometimes call them the draggers. They're known for being really fixed in tradition, right? Or in this is the way that we do things. You often will see this more and more if you have people who've been in an organization for a very long time, where they've seen a lot of leaders and initiatives come and go, right? Oh, this is the new shiny object, wait it out for 3 years and it's going to be something new. Why would we bother to put in the time? Now, what gets a little bit interesting here is that just because you might be a middle adapter in some changes in your organization, there's a good chance that other changes you could also be a late adapter, or maybe those rare moments where you're like, yes, early adapter, let's go. So first, we want to be thinking about what is it about those different types of changes that would make us fall in one of those 3 categories. So we're going to take about 2 to 3 minutes right now to do another self-reflection. So think about the types of change where you might fall as an early adapter, a middle adapter, or where you might find yourself being that dragger in the late adapter category. And in those moments, what specifically do you as an individual find helpful in getting you to adapt to changes within an organization? So go ahead and take 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll put you back in your triads. Welcome back. I think we still have a few more seconds before everyone's back in the room. As I mentioned when I first started sharing, is that we had an opportunity to look at the change process within each individual person on your team. And while even that amount of information can feel like this is a lot as a leader to navigate, making space for people to be able to talk through where they're at, intentionally finding ways for them to engage in the change process, we also still have the responsibility of looking at what does an organization need to do in order to support change? How do we help move an entire team of people through the change process? And as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at Kotter's 8 steps for leading change. And I would love to spend 4 to 5 hours with you diving into all of the details that goes into each of these 8 steps. But again, for the purpose of today and to get you out on time, what I'm going to do is give kind of a high-level walkthrough of what the 8 stages are. And then we're going to have an opportunity to think about where in our organization are we really solid? We're really excelling in this space when we roll out change. And where might be the next area that I really want to focus on improving in? You'll notice on the far left that there are 3 main chunks that these 8 steps divide into. It's about us as leaders being able to create the climate for change, that then leading into engaging and enabling the organization, and then the actual implementation of the change and building a system that will sustain it. Now, when you look at steps really 1 through 3, we're focused really heavily on creating the climate for change. Step 1 is just creating a sense of urgency. And I'll continue to kind of use the example that I explained recently about us getting a new project management system. Right? This is a time when you as a leader need to be able to tell the story about why this change is important, right? What becomes possible for our organization if we adapt this change, or what might we be losing out on or risk if we don't move forward with a change, right? So you're creating the sense of urgency. You also want to be thinking about, how do I build a really powerful coalition of people? And this isn't always thinking about people who have influence based on their title or their position of authority, but who are the people on your team that people really have a lot of trust in, people who are known to be good thought leaders that other people would want their opinions and thoughts around. How can you engage them early on in that coalition process? Now, I will say one of the traps that we can fall into in leadership is building the easy coalition. Who are the people that I already know are going to support me in this change? Who are those early adapters that are going to be just as excited as I am? But you are setting yourself up for better chance of success if you can also include some of your middle adapters. Because if they're in this coalition coming at it through a slightly more cautious lens, they can do a great job of giving you some insight of things to consider. I would even go so far as to suggest reaching out to some of the draggers in your organization, because if they have seen a lot of initiatives be attempted in the past, they might have some really helpful background or historical information that could be helpful in rolling this out. And number 3, we talk about creating this strategic vision, okay, clarifying how the future with this change is going to be different from the past. For us with our project management tool, how is it going to change our workflows? How is it going to be more efficient? How is it going to add depth to the projects that we're trying to work on? And then once that's all created in that internal, you're really shifting the focus onto engaging and enabling the organization. This is where that information gets shared. So how are you communicating the vision? And if you're an organization that's had a lot of change initiatives fail in the past, it can be helpful to help explain why this is different. What is going to make this change a better chance of success than everything we might have attempted in the past? If we gloss over it and pretend like we've never had barriers to the change process or we've always been amazing at it, it could cause a little bit of a lack of trust in the team. So sometimes just naming that can be really helpful. And then we want to empower action. And you as a leader have a great opportunity here, because as your team members are trying to go through the box and they're trying to take on the change, one of the best things that you can do is to acknowledge and remove barriers. So make space for your team members to be sharing, hey, here's what's working, here's what's not. And the things that you have control over to pave the way, make sure that you're kind of offering that support in those times. The other component here, when we're talking about how do you implement and sustain change, this really gets into more of a systemic approach. Looking at creating quick wins is a great way to keep people engaged. If we rolled out our project management tool and then waited until the end of Q1, the end of the first quarter, to even talk about how things are going, we've already lost probably over half of the team. Instead, we really looked at how can we every week be sharing out with a team some success that has happened? What's been a new way of utilizing the tool that we're just learning about now? What is that huge win that 2 departments had of learning how the tool can help communicate, and celebrating that in front of the organization? That helps to keep that momentum going and keep building on the change, right? We had our Q1 presentation. We're celebrating the fact that we're using the tool. And now what, right? What is the next level of the change? What is the next area of focus, the next mini goal, so that we keep the focus and intention in that space? And then that last one is making it stick. This is about how do you as a leader, as many of you mentioned, leaders change over time. Leadership evolves. How do you make the change outlive you? And so one of the ways that you can look at that is, how do I build it into supervision meetings? How do I maybe take this change that we're doing and implement it into the strategic plan, or present it within our board of directors meeting, depending on how your leadership structure is? How do you try to embed that change into all of these checks and balances so that it becomes a fabric of your organization and not your new shiny project? And the more that you can engage your team members in letting them get their head, their hearts, and their hands all involved in this process, the more likely it is that the change is going to be effective. Now, I realize that throwing a high-level 2-sentence approach about 8 steps that could be broken down for weeks, it makes it a little bit challenging to fully grasp all the concepts, but I'm hoping that it at least gives you a glimpse to be able to answer which of these 8 phases does your organization do well in when it comes to leading change? What have you experienced in the past? And then maybe what do you think is one of those 8 steps that would be an opportunity for your organization to grow in through some intentional focus? And Lainey, I believe, has a graphic of that image, so you don't have to remember it all in your head. So she'll go ahead and drop that in the chat so you can pull it up if you want to refer back. As I look at timing right now, what I'd like to do is just actually turn this into a group discussion. So feel free to be jotting some notes down and reflecting, but is there anybody who automatically had something come to mind that you're willing to share with the group?
I'll go, Katie. I didn't raise my hand. So I think the first one, creating the climate and then creating urgency. Why do we need this change? I think we're really good at doing that because we're really good at finding the problems, right? So we're like, we know that we need to fix something. And so this is why we need the change. And I think, picking out that coalition and then creating a vision, like what is this change actually going to do? Is it going to solve the problem? How's it going to solve the problem? That's when it gets a little bit more challenging. But I think sometimes that why, like we know that, there's an issue and here's a change that might solve that.
That's great. And Jean, one of the things that makes me think of is that sometimes as leaders, we're really excited about the why, or it makes really good sense to us. And we don't think about the why that might matter to all of our different team members. And I hadn't even mentioned that, so I appreciate you bringing that up. Being able to articulate the why for the organization, but also looking at it through the lens of what each team member cares about. How does this impact their day-to-day work? Thank you for bringing that up. Kathy.
Hi, I just, I've heard about Kotter's 8 steps before, but seeing it today really made a difference to me. Number 1, create a sense of urgency. I think that gets misunderstood, the word urgency, because that's sort of like panicky. We have to do this, we have to do it right away. But the words following it inspire people to act to achieve a bold aspirational opportunity. I love that. So I just have an issue with the word urgency because I think people mishear it, misunderstand it, and misuse it. That could lessen the impact of a change that might be very important and very, very good by saying this is urgent. We really got to do it. And those are my 2 cents for that. But thank you for this graphic. I really like seeing it, and I like the wording after the colon.
Yeah. Kathy, thank you so much for sharing that. You're absolutely right. That term urgent can really bring to mind some of that frantic pace as opposed to a really strategic approach to saying we need to prioritize it.
Yeah.
I'm recognizing we have 3 minutes left, and I know we have some next steps to make sure you have the take back deck and materials that you need. But Arlen, I wanted you to have a chance to share your thoughts first before we move on.
Thanks. I'll just try to be really quick. Our organization has been through a really difficult round of change. And I wish we had this graphic and used it as a guide. But I think some of the things that particularly resonate with me is around the strategic vision. And I think in particular that having a written down plan with clearly articulated objectives and potential impacts, anticipated and potential impacts would have been super helpful. And then I think there should be opportunities to refine and revise the plan if it doesn't work. And so I think that's actually still a stage that we're at in our organization. And I think, I think that's kind of missing from this diagram, like reflect and refine. So those were my thoughts.
Arlen, I so appreciate you bringing that up because there's a difference between this change is a little bit uncomfortable and we have to hold strong versus we're blindly not even open to acknowledging that maybe this isn't the right change for the team. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Heather, I apologize. I cut in a bit to yours, but I know there are probably some people on this call that would love to further the conversation with their team. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Oh, and you're on mute, Heather.
Let me find all the buttons in a timely fashion for you all. Okay. So I'm just going to dive into just quick next steps for all of you in terms of what's available. First and foremost, I think some of you already sound like you've had some ahas and some takeaways that you probably want to implement. And we would encourage you to make sure those make it to your to-do list after today. We know that your chance of success of actually implementing this is much greater if you move into that space where it lives on your to-do list. You, as we said at the beginning, will receive a survey. And once you complete that survey, you will get a take back deck. That take back deck is a simplified PowerPoint again, and a thought organizer to help you continue the conversation in your organization about how we might lead change in a way that leaves people feeling like they are cared for. You probably heard throughout today that we have a whole other slew of curriculum. In fact, we have 3 foundational courses that really talk about how we do this at a deep level, focusing first on ourselves as leaders and then helping others as well by how we lead, and then being strategic about how we implement these across our organization. So if you want more information on our foundational classes or want us to bring a training to your team, you can get more information from Lainey. And then we encourage you to continue attending the series where we'll share more information with you on different topics that are near and dear to our hearts and near and dear to creating caring workplaces, which is what we're all about. I am 1 minute over. It was a pleasure seeing all of you, names, faces, etc. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again on our next call, which is May 22nd, where we're going to have a panel speaking on creating workplaces that are built on trust, obstacles, challenges.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.